This is almost like Walmart coming in and basically saying, like, you guys, we're going to Bigfoot you in this town. We're going to squash the competitors. And in terms of our suppliers, you're going to live or die based upon whether or not you meet our terms.
It feels that way to me, Sam. Maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but this is what I see. This is what I see. Everybody who's walking into the Trump administration, literally everybody. We could go down the
Well,
list.
let's go down that list, because I
all right,
wonder, like,
all right.
what is the interplay if this is, I mean, and we can look at guys like Pruitt, right, who's in
Right.
there at the head of
Well,
EPA,
that's an obvious one,
and
right? This is a climate change denier who's going to be the head of the EPA. I
and
mean,
the co-chair of his reelect campaign, I think in 2014, was Harold Hamm, who is
exactly.
a huge.
Harold Hamm is the CEO of Continental. He was supposedly the pick for energy secretary before he said no. And if you don't know, Continental Resources is the largest, actually, it's the second largest fracker in the Bakken in North Dakota. And Harold Hamm controls that company. And who did he pick to head up energy? Well, he picked Oops guy,
Right.
Rick Perry. And he's, from Texas, nothing but an oil lover. I mean, we could go down the list. So there's let me see how many more I can just think of off the top of my head. You talked about Pruitt at the EPA. Zinke, who's the Interior Secretary, is a big fan of drilling for coal and oil on public lands. He's the head of the Interior Department.
Huh.
I mean, you get Gary Cohn, who's coming in as the Council of National of Economic Advisors. They talk about him like he's a Goldman Sachs guy, and he is. He's president of Goldman Sachs. But many people don't know that he cut his teeth on the New York Mercantile Exchange, where I was trading oil. He's an oil guy. The Secretary of the Army coming in is Vinnie Viola. This is the Secretary of the Army. He cut his teeth standing right next to me in the gasoline pits at the New York Mercantile Exchange. He's an oil trader. Carter Page, who's their big guy in Russia, who's part of their economic their foreign policy group in the election. He was in Russia for years working as a consultant to Gazprom, and started his own hedge fund called Global Energy Capital. I mean, you can go down the list one after the other of guys who have not small connections, but the head of commerce, Ross,
Right.
Wilbur Ross.
Wilbur Ross.
He runs a hedge fund. One of his largest investments is with Exxon Resources. It's a natural gas company in the United States, and it's been a lousy investment for him. He'd love a chance to help make that a winner as opposed to a loser.
So
Carl Icahn is part.
Right.
He's got huge investments in an offshore company called Transocean, and with copper mines in Indonesia. I mean, you can't get away from it. It's all resources everywhere you look.
And so, what is the relationship between opening up all the lands? I mean, actually drilling more in this country. What is the relationship between that and the potential glut that it produces with our international relations? I mean, how, because it seems, I mean, to someone like me who's not as well educated about this at all, it seems like those are, there's a little bit of tension there, right? I mean, if we're going to keep producing extraordinary amounts of oil domestically, how does that implicate our relations with Russia or with Saudi Arabia, whatnot?
Okay, well, look, from my perspective and from most oil analysts' perspective, well, I wouldn't say most, but here's the point. This has been an outlier the last 2 years. Low energy prices, low natural resource prices, low copper prices has been a real outlier. In general, since the turn of the century, we've been seeing a steady rise in the costs of natural resources. And most people, me particularly, but most people think that this has just been a bump in the road caused by various other financial factors and what has been a short-term overproduction, particularly in oil and gas here in the United States. But that fundamentally not only will change, but if you gave me an hour, I could explain to you why it has to change. So prices that you're seeing now for gasoline, oil, natural gas, coal, even copper for sure, zinc, iron, all of these things, they're unnaturally low. And over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, in my view, triple, all of them, triple. And, again, if you had an hour, I could prove that to you. Now, most analysts don't go there because they can't go there. They have an obligation to investors not to be wrong. So they can't make wild predictions. But if you talk to people who are inside, they know that these prices are unsustainable. They know that they're headed up. The only question is how fast and how far.
Wow.
So that's really where we are. We have a group of people inside the White House, coming into the White House, who understand that fundamental fact that the prices that we're staring at for oil, gas, and other resources are unnaturally low, and they won't stay that way. So what do you do to plan for that?
They're basically using our government as a huge buying opportunity.
Yeah, look, this is a corporatocracy we're building here. This is, if you thought, what's good for General Motors is good for the country. I'm working on a long form piece, which I hope will be picked up by somebody, but it's called the Exxon Presidency. I mean, this is what this is going to be about. It's not going to be talked about. They'll talk, they'll, like you say, they'll talk about the pee-pee jokes or whatever, and they'll talk about what, whatever mistakes, of Ivanka, had when she was whatever. But
Right.
these are the big issues that will affect us and affect the world globally over the course of the next 4 years of Trump. It's about this damage, this impossible to turn back damage that will be done by this singular mobilization of resources.
Hey, it's Sam Seder. Why don't you subscribe to this channel? You can do so right over here. Subscribe.